Well, good morning again. So glad you're here today. My name is Joel Dorman. I'm the lead pastor. And to our guests today, thank you so much for being with us. Your presence is an honor for us to have you here. If you're joining us online, thank you very much for being with us as well. We're honored to be part of your journey. Wherever you are today, in the hospital, watching from home, maybe you're listening to this later in the week and you're driving to and from work. But thank you for allowing us to be part of this journey with you. I want to get started this morning playing a little game I creatively call Covered in Chocolate. Everybody likes chocolate, right? Yeah, okay. A few like it a little more than others, I think. I've actually enlisted the help of a volunteer. He didn't volunteer. I asked him to help me out. Tino, come on up, man. Tino's going to help me out. Will you guys give a thank you to Tino for being the volunteer? Yeah, come on up, buddy. Okay, now Tino is in our life group, so I may hear about this week in our life group. Thank you for being willing to help me out. So I have 3 goodies here. They are all edible, okay? Nothing harmful in these at all, okay? I told him beforehand, I asked him, do you have any food allergies? He said no. That doesn't mean he likes everything, but he has no allergies. It's all covered in chocolate, okay? I'll tell you that much. You have 3 choices, and what I want you to do, you're going to get to try all 3, okay? But pick one, take a bite, and tell me what you think of it. That's it. Just tell me what you think of it. It's all edible, okay? Promise.
Well, my wife's going to kill me because she doesn't want me to eat chocolate, but it's okay.
It's okay because you're helping me out. Okay, here's the first one. What is that one? Chocolate covered what?
Ooh, it's like onion. My goodness.
That's garlic, yeah. Chocolate covered garlic, yeah. You like that, Tino?
It's garlic.
Is that good? Woo, I can smell the garlic from here. Woo.
It's pretty strong, wow.
Yeah, you might want to wash your mouth out after. Okay.
That'd open your sinuses.
Yeah, yeah, it could have been horseradish, could have been worse. Okay, take your pick. Do you have 2 more?
Oh, wow. I wonder what this is going to taste like.
Okay, what's that?
Well, that's strawberry.
Yeah, chocolate covered strawberry. Yeah, that one's good. That one's good. You like that one, I'm assuming.
Yeah, good.
Okay, now number 3. I can still smell the garlic. Man.
Uh-oh.
What's that one for
What
you?
on earth is that?
That's an onion.
Oh, that's onion.
There's your onion. Chocolate covered onion, right? You need a little something there? Okay. So I had chocolate covered garlic, chocolate covered strawberry, chocolate covered onion. Which was your favorite?
Wow.
You could take them back. You could take them back to your wife if you want, right? Maybe this can be something for life group. Maybe we can bring it to life group, right? Al, Bev, we can cover some garlic and chocolate and bring it to life group, right? Probably shouldn't do that, right?
No.
Okay. Well, Tino, thanks for helping me out. Here's a little something for you to go buy something actually sweet that tastes good. Thank you very much for helping me out, man. You are a very, very good sport. If you have to go wash your mouth out, I really won't mind. I'm going to move this table back because when I say this garlic is strong, I am not kidding. Man, I love garlic, but when he bit into that thing, I felt badly for him. I feel bad for Wilma, too. So the moral of the story is some things don't taste good no matter how much chocolate you put on it. That you can, I doused that garlic and that onion in chocolate. I just soaked it and wrapped it and rolled, and it still didn't taste good together. And what's true for food is also true for people, all right? It doesn't matter what's on the outside. What matters is what's on the inside, because that's going to stink through no matter what we have on the outside. And so the real question is not what are you covered with. The question is what are you filled with? Because what you're filled with is going to come out. A friend of mine often says who you are is going to come out of your neck if it doesn't come out of your mouth. In other words, whether you say it or not, who you are has a way of bubbling to the surface, just like chocolate-covered garlic has a way of bubbling to the surface. No matter how much I try to cover it in sugar and chocolate, it's going to come out. Well, Jesus was saying the same type of thing, though. When I'm the first person to kind of figure this out, that it's what inside that counts. Jesus talked about this. Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 through 12, he's talking about this. And to set this up a little bit, what's going on is Jesus had just had another famous confrontation with the group of religious leaders of his day. And they made a practice of trying to trip him up in his teaching. They would ask a question that was very technical, very nuanced, and one of those questions that no matter how he answered it, it wasn't it was almost like half right and half wrong. I mean, it was that kind of question. It was completely baited. It was clickbait. Okay, that's what they were doing. It was a question that was kind of half right, but to completely answer it was incredibly complicated. They did this all the time to him. Well, Jesus finally shut them down at this point. After this, they stopped asking questions. They're too afraid to ask. And right after he answers that question, and they basically stop asking questions, he turns to the crowd and he starts saying these verses. And this is where we pick up, Matthew 23, 1 through 12. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have only one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." So in these first 4 verses, Jesus is not so much criticizing the Pharisees per se, as much as he's using them as an example to his own people to draw a comparison between who they are and who he's calling his people to be. And it's interesting because he tells his people, you need to do what they say, but please don't do as they do. I mean, we oftentimes will say that doesn't work in real life with our children. We know that doesn't work. You can't say, hey, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, we have to set a good example. And Jesus is saying that, hey, by the way, you do hear what they're saying. They sit in a position of authority. You do need to obey them. You do have to listen to them, but don't imitate them. Now, we hear this after like 21 centuries of the church. And we kind of, if you've been on the church thing for a while, you kind of get an idea where Jesus is going with all this. But in the time he was saying this, the Pharisees were extremely respected. The Pharisees were the religious of the religious. They were the Jews of the Jew. They were the pinnacle of everything that a Jewish man would have wanted to be as a man and everything that a Jewish woman would have wanted to be. I mean, they were the top of the food chain. They were the absolute most revered people in the community. People were genuflect when they came around them. There was so much respect that the community had for them that for Jesus to say this, it would have been shocking. I mean, it actually would have been offensive to the average person because they wanted to be a Pharisee, and Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't be a Pharisee. But at the time, being called a Pharisee was a compliment. So Jesus then goes on and he says, here's why I don't want you to be called a Pharisee. Here's why I don't want you to be like them, because everything they do is to be seen. Verses 5 through 7. So he's saying that what they do is strictly to be done for others. Verse 5, he says it directly. Look at it. He says, everything they do, eventually there's a verse reference there, that says everything they do is to be seen. Very beginning of verse 5, that's the beginning of what Jesus is saying of why they need to do as the Pharisees do as they say, but not as they do. Because everything they do is done for people to see. In other words, the implication there is that if people weren't watching, they wouldn't be doing it. Let that one sink in. They only did it when people were looking at them. Now, Jesus is the Son of God. He knew what they did. He knew what they did in secret. He knew what they did in public. He knew everything. And he's saying, they're only doing it because you pay them respect. So it said that they make their phylacteries wide. And the phylactery was a little wooden box that they would build, that they would put on their shoulders or sometimes on their head, sometimes on their chest. And inside of these would be little handwritten copies of the Scripture. Their own hand, they would have written out little Bible verses to put it in our language. And they'd put this in these little boxes and they'd put it on their shoulder. They would have worn these during prayer times, maybe on Saturday when they'd gone to synagogue, they would have worn them. But to wear them out in public on like a Sunday through a Friday would have been the height of religious arrogance. I mean, from our way of thinking and from Jesus' way of thinking. Not only did they wear them out in public every day of the week, they made them really big, like obnoxiously large, so that everyone could see, oh, there's a Pharisee. There's a religious person. And so you'd see the scripture box, and it was a reminder of how high up the spiritual food chain they were. And they also made the tassels on their garments long. By the way, they only were supposed to wear these garments on special occasions, but they wanted everybody to know how good they were. So they showed how well off they were by the length of their tassels. Again, you got to put yourself in first century Jewish world. This is not 21st century America here, okay? They're in the first century Jewish world. Their clothing, their phylacteries, these scripture boxes being overly sized, was their way of telling everybody else, you are not as good as I am. And everybody else was obliged to say, okay, you're great, and I'm less than you. I'm nobody, and you're somebody. And the only reason they did it was because everybody's looking at them. And so these were the presidents and the vice presidents of the club of religious people. And everybody knew it, and everybody wanted to be friends with them. And everybody wanted to be known by a Pharisee, and they wanted to know a Pharisee. And Jesus is saying, they have missed it by a mile. And then he goes on. He's not done yet. And Jesus keeps going. He says, authority is not a bad thing, but authority looks differently with my people. It looks differently with the church. Verses 8 through 12 are the turning point, when Jesus is really trying to bring all these pieces together for his followers. And he's telling them that yes, authority exists. And there is authority even in the church, and there is authority in the Bible, but it's not meant to be established as a system of saying, I am better than you, and you are so much lower than me. See, that's what the system had become by the time Jesus came along. That the Pharisees sat in a seat that was a position of being greater than everyone else. And so the titles that they were called, rabbi, teacher, father, instructor. It's not that the Bible is anti-title. Titles are all over the place in the Bible. The Bible is not anti-authority. Authority is all over the place in the Bible. The Bible is against making authority something that becomes oppressive and is used to crush people beneath my feet so that I can feel better about myself by standing on your back. And that's what the Pharisees did. They created a system that they benefited from and everyone else simply suffered from. And every time they used a title, and they would call them rabbi, or they would call them father, or they would call them instructor, or they would call them teacher, or they would call them anything else, it was a reminder of this system that was designed to make the Pharisees look greater and all the peons look lesser. And Jesus says, but it shouldn't be that way among you. When Jesus says the word but, you need to pay attention. When Jesus drops the word but, he is about to drop a truth bomb on us, and it's usually something you need to underline 3 or 4 times. If you're in an electronic version, highlight it in red or super bright yellow and put an error on it. When Jesus says but, he is about to really change our world. Because he says, but with you it should be different. It's not that authority doesn't exist, it should be used differently. That authority is given in the church to pick people up, to make them, to inspire them to grow closer to God, not to remind them how much further they have to go. See, same authority, different use. So Jesus really messes with our minds in verses 11 and 12 because he says, the greatest among you. See, there's that greater, lesser idea. The greatest among you, followers of Jesus, will be your servant. Will be the person underneath you. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves, they will be exalted. Now, the Pharisees started off well. I mean, they really did. It's interesting to note Jesus never criticizes their theology. He never says, man, you Pharisees are way off on your doctrine. He never once says that. Like ever. But he does sharply criticize their hypocritical attitudes. He sharply criticizes the fact that they know the law so well and they simply use it as a battering ram against everybody else. He criticizes that all the time. But they started off well. The history of the Pharisees is really interesting. In the intertestamental period, that's that space between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New, hundreds of years that we call the silent years, where there was nothing. We don't have it in the Bible, we simply have it in history. But during this time, there was a schism in the Jewish faith. There was a split, if you will, between the Hasidians and the Hellenists. So when Greek culture came along, the Jewish people had a choice. They'd been conquered, and Greek culture was taking over, and they had a choice. And this choice produced a schism. The Hasidians believed that the Jewish faith should be kept pure, that it should be kept undefiled by any invading culture, and that the law of God was the law of God and it should never be changed, that it was holy, that it was sacred, that it should be honored, and that we shouldn't begin to change all of this stuff and change the core of our message to simply suit Greek culture. Doesn't that sound familiar? That group eventually produced the Pharisees. Right doctrine, no question. They had it right. This other group over here, the Hellenists, they wanted to take pieces of Greek culture and redo Jewish culture and Jewish religion. So remember, their religion and their culture were the same thing. It's not like America, where our faith is one thing and our Americanism is another. For the Jewish people, it was the same thing. The law in the Old Testament was as much civil as it was ceremonial, and as it was religious. It was all the same thing. So these Hellenists, though, they took the Greek culture around them and they began to put it in. They were syncretists. Okay? They began to combine all these pieces of Greek culture and they really sold out the core of their message. That group eventually gave rise to the Sadducees, the other group that Jesus is talking about. Interesting to note, the Pharisees ended up becoming the religious leaders, but the Sadducees had all the political power. They were the ones in the Sanhedrin. They were the only ones who could actually have gotten Jesus crucified, the Sadducees. And the only thing that the Pharisees and the Sadducees agreed on was Jesus was a menace and they needed to kill him. Otherwise, they didn't agree on anything. Understandably, because they're just night and day in terms of philosophical and theological reference. Now, why is that important? Because the Sadducees sold everything that was faith. And the Pharisees sold everything that was grace. And Jesus is saying, they got it right theologically, but maybe they got it right philosophically. That maybe they're only doing it to be seen. So the question still sticks with us. What happened to the Pharisees to have that much truth and to be right and to live it out so wrong? Because can't we be the same way? Can't we be the Pharisees that may have all the truth and we may be right? As Pastor Chris Hodges in Birmingham, Alabama would often say, you can win the argument, but still lose their heart. So have you really won the argument? How can it be that we can have so much truth and understand so much about grace and so much about God and so much about Jesus, and then live it out in such a way that they find Jesus repulsive? How can that be? Maybe it's because there's a little too much Pharisee in us. Maybe there's a little bit too much of us that wants to wear large phylacteries and long tassels and show people how good we really are. And we're only doing it because they're watching. You know, they say character is what you do when nobody's looking. So is faith. It's what you do when nobody's watching. See, here's what Jesus is saying. Look at this. Hypocritical religion wants to be seen. Humble religion wants to serve. That's what Jesus is telling us. That's what he's telling us. Hypocritical religion wants to be seen. It just wants to be noticed. It wants to sound it aloud. Look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing. Look at me. Aren't I good? Look at all the people I take care of. Look at all the money that I give. Look at all the good things that I do. Look at it. Look at it. Hypocritical religion wants to be seen. Humble religion, though, wants to serve. It shies away from the spotlight. It says, no, not me, you. You want to know if your religion is hypocritical or humble? Then examine in your head and your heart. Are there people that you look down on because they're not spiritually where you are? Maybe they have a past, and that past makes you look at them kind of sideways. Ooh. They'd be great, but, man, 40 years ago, they did that. Man, they could be fantastic, but 3 days ago, they did that. See, that's how you know it's hypocritical. So I got a news flash for you. No matter who you are, no matter what you think you've done, no matter how good you think you are the bad guy in somebody's story. But we want the pedestal. We want to be noticed. And Jesus says, no, that's hypocritical religion. You're just doing it to be seen. But humble religion just wants to serve. That's where we get the expression, practice what you preach. And Jesus said that. They say this stuff, they do it to be seen, but they don't lift a finger. Practice what you preach. That's why we say that. If you're going to talk it, you better walk it. Because hypocritical religion wants to be seen. Humble religion, it wants to serve. Years ago, back in my days as a worship pastor, actually it was in my final days as a worship pastor when I was doing Pastor Sam's job for another congregation. I had this, on our worship team, I had this bass player, and the guy was amazing. He is a phenomenal bass player. I doubt he's lost skill over 6, 7, 8 years. Amazing. But better than that, the guy had just the heart of a servant. If it needed to get done, he just got it done. He didn't say anything, he just did it. And you never knew about it till you asked around and said, who did that? Then finally somebody figured out, it was him. It was always him. He was that guy. He always just did it. Well, one day, on one Thursday night, we're sitting in a worship team rehearsal, and it's just the worship team, so it's just the band and the singers and some people back in the booth, sound, light, video, just worship team practice. And sitting back there, and we called a break, and I looked at him, and I was in front of everybody, and I said, hey, man, I just want to say, I'm not looking at y'all in particular. He was on my right when I said this. I'm not picking on you. I'll look this way. I said, hey, man, the way you serve, it's humbling and it's challenging to me. That inspires me. Thank you for serving the way you do, because it really challenges me that I need to step up my game and serve like that, just quietly and humbly. Now, I meant it from the bottom of my heart. And other people, I think, took it that way, but he caught me after that rehearsal, and he was so angry at me. I will never forget his face. I can close my eyes right now, and I can see his face. He was so upset at me. He said, why'd you do that? And I said, because I meant it, man. I knew it. I could figure it out that I hurt his feelings somehow. And I said, I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. I really meant it. I wasn't kidding around. You amaze me. You just serve. And you don't tell anyone. That's amazing. And he goes, I don't serve so you can tell me thank you. He said, I serve because that's what a Christian does. Don't take away my blessing by putting me in the spotlight. He said, don't ever do that again. Now, I may not agree with his interpretation of how far he takes that, but I don't question his heart. Because his heart was like, I'm not doing it so you can tell me thank you. And look, we tell our volunteers thank you all the time. I think he took that too far. My point in the illustration is his heart. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't want to thank you. He didn't serve to be told thank you. He served because, like he said, this is just what a Christian does. So he's always the person I see when I read that sentence. Humble religion wants to serve. And he still does that. Hypocritical religion, though, wants to be seen, but humble religion wants to serve. So thinking back to our chocolate-covered, garlic. Good grief, I got to get that on my nose. It's not important to be covered with religious deeds. We need to be filled with chocolate. We got to be filled with the sweet goodness of Jesus. We got to be filled to the point that what's on the outside matches what's on the inside. And I've got 3 quick ideas that we can do that. 1, we need to be filled with humility. Now, the most obvious example of that is serving. In just a few minutes, when I'm all wrapped up, you got the connection card there. You can grab a clipboard if you want to write on it, and you can just fill out where you want to serve. Maybe you don't have a good idea, but look, there are so many needs, not just here. We got a great, serving force. We do. We're always wanting to add more. But look, there are nonprofits faith-based nonprofits in our community that are desperate for people to serve. They just need someone to show up and to help. Be filled with humility. Maybe you can say, I want to help those. We have got a list in our office of these faith-based nonprofits that tell us we need this and we need that and we need that. We ask them, what do you need? Because we as a congregation, we want to be the go-to church for volunteers for our city. And you guys are great. You always step up and you always help out. So maybe that's you and you're going to fill that out. Be filled with humility by serving. Also, I want you to be filled with mercy. Be filled with mercy grace by investing and inviting. Invest and invite is a shorthand expression we use to invest in your friends and your family and your neighbors and your coworkers and have those spiritual conversations. Make sure they realize who you are in Jesus. Not perfect, but forgiven. The world doesn't mind that we make mistakes. Do you know that? The world doesn't mind that we're not perfect. They mind when we're hypocritical and lie about it and act like we are. They can deal with your faults. They really can. But be filled with grace. Invest in them. Have these spiritual conversations. Be that source of light in Jesus to them, so that when something happens in their life, and man, I've got 100 stories from you folks where this has happened, where when something happens in their life, they come to you and they say, can you pray for me? Because they know it's real. That's investing. Invite them. Invite them to have those conversations. We're entering the season of the year that is like the Super Bowl for the church. It used to be Easter, but that's not so true anymore. Now it's Thanksgiving through Christmas time. Because people in our culture are so open to spiritual conversations, gratitude and being #blessed, and then all the way through, trying to find deeper meaning at Christmas time and something apart from the commercialism. Folks, we've got the answer. And if you've had those conversations, if you've been planting those seeds, if you've been opening yourself up and inviting them into your heart and loving them authentically, then you've got that chance to invite them in and say, hey, why don't you come with them to my church service? See, if they know you, they're not going to automatically reject it. Because you are the missionary. And so they may not like this whole organized religion thing, but if they like you, they might give it a shot. And now the family of faith gets a hold. Some of you are sitting here today because somebody got a hold of you. And then they brought you in here, and a whole bunch of us got a hold of you, and that's why you're still here. This works. Be filled with grace. Everybody loves chocolate. Be filled with the chocolate of grace. Be that person. Lastly, be filled with mercy. This is my favorite one. Oh, I love this one. Be filled with mercy by, here's an idea. Do something for someone this week, and don't tell anybody. Don't put it on social media. Don't announce it. Just do it. And I'll tell you what you can do, because the world is also into kind of random acts of kindness. So we like to step up our game a little bit. We've got these cards. We call them the Pay It Forward cards. That's why it's in quotes there, Pay It Forward. It's referencing these cards. And it separates our acts of kindness from just a random, generic, I'm going to feel better about myself because I've done it, act of kindness. The front of it says, actions speak louder than words. Jesus would agree. The backside says, but if we had to use words, we'd say Jesus loves you. Because we're making sure people realize Christians are doing this. We're doing some random act of mercy, random act of kindness, and we're going to make sure they know Jesus was the inspiration behind that. We've got these. We always keep these cards around. They're at the info center today. There's a stack of them out that you can grab, and if you've got them, use them. If you've got your own cards, I don't care. You want to leave nothing but a handwritten note? Here's an idea for Thanksgiving, okay? I do this every year, and I will do this every year so long as the Lord gives me breath to say it. Thanksgiving Day, okay? Get up a little earlier, get a goodie bag together, take it to local police stations or fire stations, whatever's closest to you. Take it to local ERs as a way of saying thank you to the people that have to work to give us a holiday. Just random. And try your best to not let them post about it, because they're going to be thankful and they're going to go, oh, we want to get your picture. No thanks. I'm not doing it for a picture. Just happy Thanksgiving. Here's a neat one. I just read this last week. A great way to show mercy. We're coming into a time of year when heating bills get high. That reverse you get, your electric bill goes down, but your gas bill goes up if you have natural gas heating your house. Well, what happens, though, for some senior citizens is that their income is so small, their air conditioning bill is pretty low because some seniors tend to be cold, so they don't run their air conditioner that much. Then they hit these months when it's colder, and their gas bill just shoots through the roof. But their income didn't go up. Read this past week. Here's a great way to show mercy. Ask the Lord to show you some senior adult, some senior citizen that you can just bless over the next couple of months by just paying that heating bill for them. Now, you're going to have to tell them because you're going to have to get some information. But they're too proud to ask for it. It's just a way you can just say, hey, just let me love you. Please let me do this for you. You know, for those of us who are kind of still in our working years, 60, 70, 80 bucks, oh, we feel it. Come on. Is it that big a deal? I mean, across a month, compared to someone that 70 or 80 bucks might as well be 5,000. And do the math on it. But it's a way to show mercy. It's a way to be filled with chocolate and show them mercy because you're not doing it so they can pay you back, and you're not doing it so they can owe you, and you're not doing it so they can do anything. But let me tell you what, it will. Anything we do in the name of Jesus that's merciful like that will change people's perception of Jesus. See, it's not about being seen. Hypocritical religion wants to be seen, wants everybody to say, look at what good I have done. Humble religion just says, here, shh, just take it. It's yours, take it. Because our Sunday best isn't even visible to other people. Actually, our Sunday best is invisible, except to the only one that really matters. That's our Master, Jesus. Let's put on our Sunday best in His name.